Now, these days, if you want news, chances are it's an online destination, and that has posed massive challenges to traditional media in terms of this concept called digital migration. For many, it's a digital migraine. There's also the increasing role that online is playing in reporting the story. Great evidence of that was seen after the Boston Marathon bombings. Well, Scott Rubin is with us, Public Affairs and Communications Director for Google in this region. Scott, a very warm welcome. Thanks for joining us. Let's pick up on this terrible tragedy in Boston. Your brand became an integral part of the whole process. Person Finder, Street View. How did you react?
So this is part of what we've been doing since 2005. We have a crisis response page that people can go to if they're looking for somebody, if they know information about somebody, and it's google.org/personfinder. Along with that, we've got lots of tools using the power of maps. So you mentioned Street Finder in Boston. We've used Street View and images that we've had in mapping, making available to first responders since the tsunami in Japan, in Indonesia, earthquakes around the world, and this allows people who are looking to see what it was like before and what happened after the disaster, and helps them plan for the next steps.
But it's also becoming an integral part of a newsroom development strategy as well, isn't it? In what respect?
Well, absolutely. So, for example, Street View, you mentioned that in Boston. Street View gives somebody based in Johannesburg the opportunity to show images of the streets of Boston before these bombings, and it enhances the storytelling, it deepens it, it helps you feel like you're right there, because that's the point of Street View. You can take a virtual walk down any street where our cameras have roamed.
And the quality and the execution of those images is becoming incrementally better, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some of the highest definition images available anywhere. And every day we're trying to improve the quality of those images, whether they're for streets of Boston or if you're trekking in the Himalayas. We now have the ability to take a trekker, essentially a rucksack, and carry it up a mountain taking images. And so you can go from through the oceans to the top of the highest peaks now.
And obviously the impact on the news product there is fairly obvious for all to see. Let's get to the arm wrestling question if we can. Traditional media could conceivably argue that you're mortal enemies or at least reluctant partners. But whichever way we look at it, this whole notion of convergence in newsrooms is now de facto, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I would say that there was a time certainly when we were seen as mortal enemies, but I think those days are long gone. I think what's happened is, as the public has adapted to consuming their news both online and offline, they become agnostic about where they pick it up, whether it's a newspaper, whether it's on TV, or whether they pick up their mobile phone and continue watching the story or reading the paper.
So content has eclipsed the brand in many ways.
Well, I think the brand is still important, and it depends on where you are in the world. So, for example, the New York Times. The New York Times is a global brand, and it's trusted no matter where you go. And so people might be loyal to that particular brand. But more and more, I think you're right. People are following the thread of the story wherever they can find it. We know at Google that all anybody has to do is one click and go somewhere else. So I think that puts additional pressure on producers of news to create the most exciting original content they can online. I think that's good for all of us.
In what respect, Scott, then, are you working with newsrooms on a day-to-day basis in order to optimize this convergence? Is it something that is, again, a deliberate part of your outreach strategy?
Oh, absolutely. We believe that we share a mission with newsrooms. I mean, our mission at Google is to provide access to information in the most usable and accessible way possible. I think that's what newsrooms do as well. And so, given that we have a shared mission, and we know that our technology is disruptive by its very nature, the internet is and Google is, so we spend a lot of time going into newsrooms, training journalists, working with young journalists when they're still in university, to teach them how to think in 3D. Instead of a two-dimensional story, now the web requires that we tell a 3D story. That means video, that means audio, that means a many-to-many conversation. So it used to be just the newsroom talking to the public, and now it's the newsroom certainly talking to the public, and the public's talking back. That's an exciting development, and we're helping newsrooms get there.
Many years ago, when I was trained to be a young reporter, the only skill I needed was a bit of curiosity and some shorthand. How things have changed. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Just in terms of a statement that you made about getting information to people, but in order that they can make better decisions. I think it's fairly obvious in what you're trying to say, but just flesh that out for me a bit.
So if you think about what the internet has done around the world, it's reaching more people than it ever has before. People who previously had access to almost no information, or it might have been state restricted. And I'm thinking about places all around the world. As smartphones reach into places they've never reached before, that means more and more people have access to the internet. Right now there are 2 billion people online. Soon there will be another 5 billion coming online. We've never seen any place in the world where the internet has not improved people's lives. So once you have more access to information, you can make better decisions about your own life. It's the democratization of information, and it's always a good thing.
But the responsibility then on you, not only as a purveyor of news, but also as an influencer, becomes that much greater.
Well, I would argue with that a little bit. We are simply a host for the news. We don't have an editorial eye, so that's your responsibility and other people who are producing the news around the world. We just give people access to it so they can make choices based on what they've learned online.
So you'll put anything on that you deem is okay to put on the internet, in other words, or is there some degree of gatekeeping there?
Well, so Google is not the internet, although in many places it feels synonymous with the internet.
You'd like it to be the internet as well, wouldn't
you?
Well,
I would argue against that, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah.
In search, where people mostly find their news, they're going to search or they're going directly to a news site. In search, there are very few things that we would not allow to be in our index. So that would be something that might harm your computer. We don't want that in there. That would be illegal material, everything from child pornography to copyrighted material that we wouldn't want to have in search. Other than that, search is a fairly open place for people to find. It's a reflection of the world.
As you rightly said, the job is ours to gatekeep, which is absolutely critical. Something we'll get to on the program next week, but you also say that you are increasing efforts to increase the quantity and quality of African content online. You have the $1 million African News Innovation Challenge. As I say, more on that next week, but give us your view quickly. Why were you involved in this?
Well, we think it's incredibly important that across Africa there is more and more local specific content. Going back to this idea that people make better decisions when they have information that's relevant to them, we need to see more and more content online that's coming from Africa. So we're one of the sponsors of this competition for innovation in digital journalism to bring better, higher quality local African content online.
And there were some astonishing ideas. I mean, the one that I'm really looking forward to talking about next week is this concept of news drones. Which really blew me away.
Well, you can think of them as cameras in the sky, and the idea again is to provide more information for people so they have access to things they wouldn't have previously been able to see without the web.
Scott Rubin, good talking to you. Thank you very much for popping in today. And you can continue the conversation on our Facebook page and also on Twitter. And don't forget my weekly Media Insights column on enca.com. Coming up on the program, a brand new way to sell licorice all sorts and Pepsi's big new Beyonce campaign.